Welcome. My name is Dr. Vikki Hufnagel, and in the 1970s, I was a resident at Cedars Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. I had come from UC San Francisco, and I had a very mixed training with many fine, wonderful mentors, and they taught me a lot. I tended to spend time taking unusual courses such as bioethics, ethics, history of medicine, and things that I thought would be eventually helpful in the kind of practice I wanted to do, which was based on the Hippocratic Oath. In the 70s, as a resident in obstetrics and gynecology, the chairman of the department was Macklin Elliott Wade. He was very flashy. He was a big bragger. He liked to brag about his wealth and his family and his position and his power. And he also bragged about his patients. And what we're talking about today is this man here, Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby came to the office when his wife would have her exams, and Wade would make sure that everybody knew that he took care of the wife and the mistress. I never knew directly who the mistress was, but commonly one of the producers, a very attractive and intelligent black woman named Carol Folks, was there often at the same time that Mr. Cosby and his wife were there. So I had this unusual feeling like maybe this is the mistress, but I never knew. And then later on, when everything came out, I noticed that Carol had produced Gloria Allred as a TV judge, even though she wasn't a judge, but she had the show where she was a judge. And then Gloria had all these clients who had claimed abuse by Bill Cosby. Having been from Berkeley and UC San Francisco, I was not the typical Cedars resident, not at all. I wasn't there for the same reasons, like I needed to live in Beverly Hills and have a Bentley. I was still from my background from Berkeley, from wanting to improve women's medicine and work on ethics and the foundation of ethics in medicine. So I was not scared enough, maybe, and I was not fearful of the truth and dealing with things that I thought were really horrid and terrible. So there was a pattern to Carol Folk being there and Mr. Cosby and his wife being there that I saw, but I can't say anything more than that. But when I went to research it more recently, I had noticed that there was a lot of information on the work that Carol had done, and now it was mostly focused on her son as the great producer, and there was not as many references in the web as I had seen previously, especially the fact that she had been the producer for the Gloria Allred judge show that it was on TV for I think like 2 years or something. Wade was flamboyant. Wade used drugs that I don't believe should be used by a practicing physician. Wade got his drugs from another doctor who was an endocrinologist who was really not his personal doctor, but who was writing prescriptions for dexedrine and drugs that were speedy like, and you could see when he was on them, like he would be running around and very verbal, and I mean, it was his behavior was really very much linked to that drug abuse. And I reported that to the California Medical Board several times. I didn't think it was appropriate for doctors who are not actually doctors of each other, and certainly not to prescribe dexedrine on a routine basis unless you have a real disease for it. And that was obviously not what was happening in the situation with Dr. Wade. Wade made sure that I heard, and a lot of people heard, that he was both the gynecologist to Bill Cosby's wife, Pamela, and he was the gynecologist of Bill Cosby's mistress. And that was something he bragged about. Cosby would have come into the outer office, and often Carol would be there, and they would hug and say, "Hi, how are you?" You know, the Hollywood hug and kiss trip that goes on. Very flamboyant and very common in Hollywood. And then he would go into the private office of Wade, and that's where Bill would wait while his wife got examined. And I was often called to come in and be the assistant at that time in the exams. It was starting to become a time where, like, hey, hey, GYN guys, you need to have a woman in the room when these exams are going on. That was taking place. And during that time, Wade often would hand me a prescription for Bill Cosby. And the prescription was always for the same drug, Quaaludes. And I, looked down at the prescription, saw what it was. I even testified to these events with a lie detector because nobody wanted to believe me. And certainly when I filed the complaints with the California Medical Board, and they attacked me and never investigated. And I can tell you that I filed many complaints as to the behavior of doctors and their care of women in situations like this that I thought were abusive. Wade was getting the dexedrine from an endocrinologist, but there was no actual, exams or records being kept. And certainly Wade, as a gynecologist, was not the doctor of Bill Cosby. He didn't have a file on Bill Cosby. He was just the friendly fix, the upper class Hollywood group. What I think is really important, and which the media and press hasn't really covered, and makes this whole trial and everything going on weak, is the history and the psychology of these individuals, Bill Cosby and Macklin Wade. It was a time of sexual behaviors that were not appropriate. The idea about bragging, well, I'm taking care of the wife and the mistress. That's not really very appropriate, is it? And then telling people about it wasn't appropriate. But it was like wanting to be connected to Hollywood and its wealth and fame. And Cedars certainly had its own wealth and fame. It's the number one, and is very powerful because the people who sit on the board of Cedars control the media also, like members of Hollywood, and there's often a member of the LA Times, etc., on the board, so it was well controlled. But when I filed my complaint, it was very simple. Dr. Wade was getting drugs from another doctor, and he wasn't a patient, and those drugs were amphetamine type drugs, and that Dr. Wade was giving Quaaludes, knowing that the Quaaludes were being used to procure sex, and that there was not informed consent. And the language was used by Mr. Cosby, nail. I'm going to nail them. That I could hear their conversations, even when I was like far out in the room, because they were loud and joking and I guess what people call it locker room talk or whatever, but it was talk of violence against women is what it was. Is that this will relax you, make you feel better. Are you anxious? Are you scared? Are you worried? Here, sweetie. But it was to nail them. And I didn't know what nail meant. I hadn't heard that term. I had access to people in the Black community who told me what it meant. It meant to have sex no matter what, use drugs, hold a woman down, rape her, to nail her. It was like sort of the concept of like getting nailed in the cross. That you couldn't move and that you couldn't do anything else. So you were a pure victim. I'm going to nail her. I remember that word so clear because I didn't know what it meant. Nail her. And that came out of Cosby's mouth. And there was no sense of like, oh, that's a bad thing to do, Bill, by Wade. No, Wade was giving the drugs to Cosby to change and alter the consciousness of the women so that they would be more unconscious, actually, or semi-conscious. But often those drugs will make you pass out. I mean, I couldn't take that drug. I would pass out and not be conscious. But I can't even drink more than like 2 glasses of wine. I mean, 1 glass of wine will put me to sleep. So everybody's liver is different in how we metabolize drugs, So I saw this and I reported it. It was ethically wrong. It was morally not right. There was nothing okay about it. And I wasn't realizing at the time that other people knew but weren't going to do anything. That they saw the hierarchy and the power structure, and they certainly weren't going to tell on anybody. They weren't going to report it. I'd reported stuff all the time. And what I learned was that the medical board wasn't interested in even investigating. Oh, it's the chairman of Cedars. Oh, it's Bill Cosby. And I'm going to have to be filing a Freedom of Information for all of the filings I did. I mean, I was doing filings all the time, and it was getting frustrating over and over again. No investigation, no calls. The mayor of a South Bay area, his wife, I'd known her very well, and she was a good patient, and she got raped by her gynecologist, and I reported that. And they never called and even asked me anything. And then when I called her, she never even had an interview over the rape, and she was very disturbed by it. I'm sure she can be found today. One of the things is that somehow I can memorize things and keep them because they're so vivid in my mind. And the uncomfortable feeling that I had about them sort of burns them in your skull. It burns them in your brain that you don't lose them. You remember them. So I tried to give all this information to the prosecution. And then I realized, like, people are only going to see Bill Cosby as how he was marketed. Bill Cosby was marketed as this really good guy, good dad, kids TV, Jello, all these products that were family oriented. But he was drugging and nailing women back in the 70s. And you can see that it's a pattern because he never stopped. He continued it through the 90s. So it's a sort of a sadistic sexual predator perversion. It's deep. And you would have to want to change and work on it. And that obviously never happened. Never happened. But for the public doesn't know about the psychology. They don't know about character disorders. They don't know about sadism and sexuality. They only see the glamorization of these things on television. They don't see the trauma, the fear, the anxiety, the destruction of the persona of the woman victim, her confusion, her self-hatred. Like, what did I do to make this happen? Must have been something in me. And you have to realize here's a man who's famous, wealthy, and powerful. Famous, wealthy, and powerful. And has this mythic good guy, good dad, good father. He's not going to drug you. He's not going to rape you because of his projection of his own persona and how it was marketed. I'll be interested in seeing the outcome, but I know that I believe personally that more of the culture and more of the psychodynamics were needed, I think, in any trial of this nature, because you can't just jump from, oh, great guy, good guy, oh, horrible guy. You have to show how that develops and the reality of the culture. Wade gave drugs as a gynecologist to Bill Cosby so that he could seduce. I'm sure he seduced some. And so that he could rape some. So that he could be sadistic to some. Do sexual acts that, if they were conscious, they would never agree to. It's very complex. And I don't know if we were ready. The public, was ready for it. Because, I'm looking back, 70s, we're talking years and years. And all the things that I filed with the medical board, now only am I able to go back and question and get documents and expose these abuses. Because the medical board only saw me as being, crazy, and troublemaker, or bad, or whatever language you want to think and use for it. Not that I was disturbed and upset, angry, and enraged that it was taking place. And more enraged that they never did anything. What good is enforcement that doesn't protect the people? It's no good. So, yes, Bill Cosby gave women Quaaludes. Yes, he did it with intent. Yes, he did it with malicious intent. And only had this been done, in a more full range with psychiatric evaluations and, looking at the politics of it, going to the medical board and, seeing how many complaints I had filed on Wade and his associates. Only you'd have to do something big and in depth, and I don't know, and how the witnesses were, because I wasn't there, but I know that the whole story wasn't given. The whole story of that it was a time of drugs and sex at Cedars. How I learned about this was as a intern. I was, right out of UC San Francisco, and I met a nurse there who I liked very much. She's a really sweet girl, a little bit wild, but sweet, and always kind to me. Her name was Janie Jacobs. And then she had a friend named Joe, and she told me, that she took Quaaludes, her and Joe, and they were nurses in the OB floor, and they were with one of the GYN OB guys, and they got caught having sex on Quaaludes. And then she told me that they got suspended for a time, so many weeks or months that they couldn't work. But nothing happened to the OB doctor. That he didn't even get a slap on the hand. He didn't get a slap on the hand. So this is the culture that was going on at the time. Have sex with women, don't have to be married, take drugs, do it in the labor room, get away with it, and have nobody touch you. I think I've got a lot to write about and a lot of names to name. And I do remember every one of them. This is Dr. Vikki concluding. We'll see what happens. And I will continue to write on the ivory towers, and I'll be writing about Bill Cosby and McLeod incident. And when I studied this, I want to make one thing also known, is that the LA Police Department knew that young girls were being taken to the Playboy Mansion. Young. We're talking under 15. And you know what happened to them at the Playboy Mansion. And they were given alcohol at the Playboy Mansion. Why was this never in the news? Why did we never hear about it? How many young girls were raped there? We do know that there's a record of Bill Cosby taking young girls there. More to think about. Write me. You can write me at Facebook, Vikki Hufnagel. And I'll be glad to hear your thoughts. And if you want to know more, I'm sure I didn't give you enough information, and maybe I wasn't clear, and more's to be done. More changes needed too. Thank you so much for your time. Truth is beauty.